Imagine walking into a house that seemed harmless, only to discover it holds secrets so dark that no human should ever uncover them. Today, you'll hear the story of Mariana, a young woman who, out of pure curiosity, decided to explore a mystery that had haunted her town for decades. But by crossing the threshold of this house, she didn't just uncover what lay behind its walls. She was consumed by something far greater. Something that now keeps her trapped, where time and reality no longer exist. Stay with us and discover what happens when the unknown decides to trap you forever. Mariana had always been passionate about mysteries. Since her youth, she loved reading about urban legends and supernatural stories. Her YouTube channel, which had a loyal following, was dedicated to investigating what many considered mere rumors, but to her, they were tales that deserved to be uncovered. She wasn't afraid to venture into dark places in search of something she could turn into a unique story for her audience. One cold autumn evening, while she was at home, with the scent of rain filling the streets of her city, Mariana received a mysterious message in her inbox. The sender was unknown, and there was no subject. She hesitated for a moment, but as always, curiosity got the best of her. She opened the message and read, "Are you ready to discover what really happened at the House of Whispers? They're waiting for you." There was nothing else. No name, no address, just that cryptic sentence. The name, House of Whispers, immediately filled Mariana's mind with a mix of excitement and unease. She had heard of the house through local stories, but she had always assumed they were just myths fueled by the community's fear. People said that at night, whispers could be heard coming from within, voices no one could explain. Some claimed those voices belonged to former residents who had never left. Determined to investigate, Mariana started searching for information on the House of Whispers. She found old accounts on forums and in articles, but what caught her attention most was a comment from an anonymous person written in 1983 saying, "If you hear the whispers, you will never be the same. They know who you are." That sentence echoed in her mind, and although she remained skeptical, something told her that she had to move forward with the investigation. The next morning, she received a second message, this time with an address. It was a small town in the countryside, far from the bustling capital where she lived. The date was set for a Friday night, as if it were a test of courage. Mariana felt a chill in her stomach thinking about all that could happen, but she couldn't deny that the adrenaline was pumping. After all, this could be the story that changed the course of her channel. As Mariana packed her bags, images of the house began to form in her mind. What awaited her there? What secrets would she have to face to uncover the truth behind the whispers? During the trip, the landscape became increasingly desolate until the road turned into a narrow, winding street with trees that seemed to form a dark corridor, as if nature itself were warning her about what was to come. When she finally reached her destination, night had already fallen. The house, in the utter silence of the town, seemed even more imposing than in the photo. Its old, neglected appearance gave the impression that time had stopped there. The windows were broken, and the wooden doors creaked with the wind, making sounds that mixed with the distant hoots of owls and the chirps of crickets. The perfect setting for any ghost story. Mariana parked her car, and as she stepped out, a shiver ran down her spine. She looked at the house with more attention, trying to spot any movement, but everything was still. Her heart began to race, and the camera she always carried with her seemed heavier than ever. She glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to be watching her, but there was nothing, only the emptiness of the night. With a mix of curiosity and unease, she approached the front door. The doorknob was cold, and as she touched it, something seemed to resist, as if the house itself were trying to protect her from what was to come. She slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside, turning on the flashlight on her camera. The smell of mold and old wood filled her nostrils, and the echo of her own footsteps seemed amplified, as if the house were reacting to her presence. With each room she explored, a sense of discomfort began to grow inside her. Every time the camera captured the house's details, dust-covered furniture, cracked walls, crooked paintings, Mariana felt a presence, a sense of being watched. With every strange noise, she turned around, trying to locate the source. But all she saw were shadows dancing to the sound of the wind seeping through the cracks. Something was there, and Mariana knew that the story she was about to tell would be more real than she could have ever imagined. As Mariana ventured deeper into the house, the door creaked loudly behind her, signaling her entry into the unknown. The house felt cold, despite the warmth of the evening outside. Each step she took seemed to echo through the vast empty rooms, and the faint smell of mildew lingered in the air. She could feel her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to remain calm. After all, she was a seasoned investigator of the paranormal. Fear was something she could control. The house seemed abandoned, but there was something unsettling about its stillness. As she walked through the narrow hallway, the faintest rustling sound caught her attention. It was a soft, almost imperceptible whisper, like the sound of paper shifting in the wind. She paused, her heart skipping a beat. But when she turned to look, there was nothing, just the shadows stretching across the old wallpaper. Mariana pressed on, reminding herself that there had to be a logical explanation for every noise. Her flashlight flickered briefly, and she cursed under her breath, tapping it a few times before the light steadied. She checked the camera in her hand, making sure it was still recording, and continued deeper into the house. The floorboards creaked under her weight, and every now and then, the distant sound of a door softly banging shut echoed through the house, but she couldn't tell where it was coming from. She pushed open the door to the living room, where the furniture was covered in white sheets, as if the house had been abandoned in a hurry. The air was thick with dust, and there was a strange stillness in the room, as if the house was holding its breath. As she stepped inside, her foot brushed against something cold on the floor. Looking down, she saw an old photograph, yellowed with age. She bent down to pick it up and immediately felt a chill run down her spine. The photo showed a family standing in front of what appeared to be the house. They looked happy, but their eyes were unsettlingly vacant, as if they weren't really there. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. It wasn't just the house, it was something in the air, something that seemed to follow her every move. She turned to the window, the glass fogged over with age. As she wiped it clear, she saw the reflection of something moving behind her in the dark. She spun around, but no one was there. The room felt colder now, and the whispers, barely audible, seemed to grow louder. They weren't in her head, they were real. Mariana's hands began to shake, but she steadied herself, gripping the camera tighter. She walked further into the house, moving past old portraits that lined the walls, their eyes seemingly tracking her as she passed. She reached the staircase that led to the upper floors, its wooden steps groaning underfoot. The air up there felt denser, as if it had been sealed away from the rest of the house. She hesitated for a moment, but then ascended, her steps slow and deliberate, the sound of her footsteps reverberating up the staircase. The second floor was dim, the only light coming from her flashlight. The hallway stretched before her, lined with doors that led into rooms she couldn't yet bring herself to explore. The whispers seemed to come from all directions now, like they were traveling through the walls. She opened the first door to her left, revealing a small, dusty bedroom. A bed sat in the corner, its frame rusted and sagging, and a rocking chair by the window creaked slowly, as if moved by an invisible hand. Mariana's heart raced as she stepped into the room, the sound of the chair creaking louder now, almost as if it was welcoming her. She moved cautiously toward the rocking chair, the whispers now clear enough to understand. They weren't random. They were words, as if someone was calling out to her. "Get out!" The voice hissed, barely above a whisper. Mariana froze, her blood running cold. She swung the camera around, scanning the room, but there was nothing. She turned back toward the chair, and to her horror, the rocking had stopped. It was as if the house itself had gone quiet, waiting for her next move. In a rush of panic, Mariana turned and bolted out of the room, slamming the door behind her. She moved to the next room, more urgently now, her breath shallow and fast. The walls seemed to close in on her, and the whispers were growing louder, almost frantic, urging her to leave. But she couldn't stop. She had to know more. She had to uncover the truth. As she reached the end of the hallway, a sudden, sharp knock echoed from behind one of the closed doors. Her body froze, the sound reverberating in the silence of the house. There was no wind. No one else was there. And yet, the knock was as real as the chill crawling up her spine. With the camera still recording, Mariana reached for the door, her hand trembling as she grasped the knob. She hesitated for just a moment, a voice deep inside telling her to turn back. But she couldn't. She opened the door, and what lay beyond would change everything. The room was empty, except for a single chair in the center, facing away from her. As she stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind her, and the whispers intensified, now screaming in her ears. "Leave, now." The air in the room was thick, oppressive, as if the house itself were holding its breath, waiting. Mariana's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing louder than the whispers that surrounded her. She glanced at the chair, which was positioned unnaturally in the center of the room. It was old, with tattered fabric, as though it had been sitting there for decades, untouched. The whispers, now frantic and almost pleading, seemed to vibrate through the floor beneath her feet. "Get out now, Mariana." They hissed, as if they knew her name. Her instinct screamed for her to turn and run, to leave the house and never return. But the curiosity that had driven her to this point now held her in its grip. What was this place? Who or what was trying to communicate with her? Mariana slowly approached the chair, her hand trembling as she reached for it. The cold metal of the doorknob was still in her grasp, and she hesitated for a moment longer, fighting the primal urge to flee. Then, with a deep breath, she turned and slowly sat down in the chair, facing the room. The moment she sat, everything changed. The whispers fell silent, as though the house had noticed her presence in a way it hadn't before. For a few long seconds, there was nothing, just the heavy silence that filled the room. Mariana blinked, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. Then, as if triggered by her movement, the floor beneath her creaked. Something was happening. The air felt colder, sharper, like a storm was brewing just beyond the walls. Suddenly, the camera in her hand flickered again. At first, she thought it was a malfunction, but then she noticed the faint outline of something in the lens. It wasn't visible to the naked eye, but through the camera, she saw a shadow flickering, almost intangible, hovering just at the edge of the frame. Her breath caught in her throat, and she quickly turned the camera toward the shadow, her fingers fumbling with the controls. The shadow didn't move as she expected, but instead, it seemed to grow more solid, materializing as if it were manifesting directly from the air. Panic surged through her, and she stood up quickly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The shadow didn't disappear, it hovered in place, now casting a dark, unnatural presence over the room. A cold gust of wind blew through the room, making her hair whip around her face. The room's temperature plummeted further, and the whispers returned, this time louder, more insistent. "You shouldn't have sat there," they said in unison, their voices layered and distorted. "They're awake now." Mariana's heart raced as she backed toward the door, her legs trembling beneath her. The house felt alive, now its walls closing in, its floors groaning under an invisible weight. The whispers were deafening, now filling the entire space, echoing through the very bones of the house. The shadow had followed her into the hallway, and it seemed to be growing larger with each step she took. There was something unmistakably malevolent about it, something that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. As she hurried down the hallway, she noticed that the doors she had passed earlier were now ajar. Each room seemed to beckon her, drawing her in with an eerie, magnetic force. She looked down at her camera and saw that the footage was distorted. The images on the screen flickered and blurred, almost as if the camera itself were struggling to capture the truth of what was happening. And then, just as she reached the staircase, the lights flickered out completely, plunging her into darkness. In the pitch black, the only sound was the rush of her own breath. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears, louder than the whispers, which had gone silent once again. Then, out of the darkness, she heard something else's soft, deliberate step. She wasn't alone. Her body tensed, every muscle frozen in place, as she slowly turned to face the source of the sound. The shadow was there, its form now clearer, though still not fully defined. It was tall, its shape shifting, like a person whose features were obscured by a veil of darkness. "Leave," a voice rasped, low and chilling, from the shadow. It wasn't one voice, it was many, all layered together in an unnatural chorus. Mariana's legs shook as she took a step back, her mind racing. Her camera was still recording, the lens trembling in her hands. The shadow raised one arm, and she saw a tan, old, rusted key dangling from its fingers. "This is the key to your escape," it whispered. "But once you use it, you can never return." The key seemed to glow faintly in the darkness, beckoning her toward it, but the warning was clear. Whatever it unlocked, it would come at a price. Mariana's mind raced as she stood frozen in place, staring at the shadow that loomed in front of her. The air was thick with tension, each second feeling like an eternity. The key, rusted and ancient still, glowed faintly in the darkness, its presence more menacing than reassuring. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her, suffocating her with the knowledge that choosing to take the key meant stepping into the unknown. The voice from the shadow was still ringing in her ears, a haunting reminder of what was at stake. "Once you use it, you can never return," it had whispered, its words echoing through her mind. Every instinct told her to run, to leave this place and forget everything she had witnessed. But there was a pull, a strange magnetic force that kept her rooted to the spot. The key seemed to call out to her, promising freedom, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that it would come at a cost she wasn't ready to pay. Her pulse quickened as she took a tentative step forward, her eyes never leaving the shadow that towered before her. The moment her fingers brushed the cold metal of the key, a surge of energy shot through her, making her body tremble. It was as if the house itself had come alive, its walls breathing, shifting, watching. In the darkness, Mariana could hear the soft rustling of something moving in the shadows. She quickly turned, but saw nothing, just the stillness of the room around her. But she felt it, the presence. The house was watching, waiting for her next move. She gripped the key tightly in her hand, feeling the coolness of the metal, its weight pressing down on her like a promise. A promise of escape, of release from this place. But was it truly escape? Or was it something far worse, a trap that would seal her fate forever? The whispers had returned, but now they were no longer just warnings. They were pleading with her, begging her to understand. "Take it, Mariana," they urged. "Take the key, and you'll be free." But something about their tone had changed. It was no longer an invitation, it was a demand. The house was desperate for her to make the choice, to give in to its power. Mariana could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the rhythm of her breath shallow and rapid. She stepped back, clutching the key tighter, her mind spinning. What if she was making a mistake? What if the house was offering her nothing more than an illusion of freedom, a lie wrapped in darkness? There was no way to know for sure, and that uncertainty was the worst part of all. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to drop the key, to walk away and never look back. But there was something else, something deep inside her that urged her to keep going. The same curiosity that had brought her to this house in the first place, the same curiosity that had led her into the heart of the unknown. With a deep breath, she looked back at the shadow, her eyes meeting its shifting form. It was still there, its presence undeniable, and the key in her hand seemed to pulse with a life of its own. She could feel the power radiating from it, beckoning her to take the final step. The decision was hers, and hers alone. She had come this far, and now there was no turning back. Mariana closed her eyes for a moment, weighing her options. Then, without another thought, she made her choice. She lifted the key, ready to use it, to unlock whatever lay beyond the door that had been waiting for her all this time. And in that moment, the house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to act. Mariana stepped forward, her heart pounding, her mind racing. The key was cold in her hand, but as she inserted it into the lock, she felt a surge of warmth, as though the house had finally accepted her. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a darkness deeper than any night. And as she stepped into it, she knew one thing for certain: the house had claimed her. As the door creaked open, a rush of cold air swept over Mariana, pushing her back. She hesitated for a moment, feeling an almost tangible force urging her to step inside. The darkness beyond the threshold was absolutely deeper than any night she had ever experienced. It seemed to swallow the light from the room behind her, leaving her in a void of uncertainty. Her hand, still gripping the key, trembled as she took a step forward. The whispers had returned, louder now, as if the house itself were exhaling its breath into her ears. "It's too late now," they murmured, their voices distant, yet unnervingly close. "You've made your choice." The moment she crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind her with a force that made her jump. She spun around, but the door was gone, replaced by a solid wall of darkness that stretched up and out of sight. Panic gripped her chest, and she took a few quick steps forward, her heart pounding in her throat. There was no going back, no escape. The key she had used to unlock the door now seemed like a distant memory, its power slipping from her grasp with every passing second. The weight of her decision began to settle in, heavy and suffocating. She should have turned back, she should have listened to the warnings. But now it was too late. A low hum began to vibrate through the air, like the sound of distant machinery coming to life. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, more distinct, until it filled the room. The floor beneath her feet shifted, and she stumbled, catching herself just in time. Her breath quickened as she looked around, but there was nothing visible. Yet she could feel the presence of something that was slowly revealing itself in the darkness. Something ancient. The whispers continued, growing louder and more frantic, now blending with the hum. "You shouldn't have come here," they warned. "Now you'll never leave." Suddenly, a shape began to emerge from the shadows, a figure, tall and thin, its form indistinct, like a silhouette cast by a flickering light. It moved slowly, deliberately, its presence drawing closer with each passing moment. Mariana's heart raced as she backed away, but the figure continued to advance. There was no escape, no safe corner to hide in. She could feel the temperature dropping even further, the cold seeping into her bones as the figure closed in. Her mind screamed at her to do something, anything, but her body refused to obey. The figure finally stopped, mere inches from her face, and in the suffocating silence, Mariana could hear her own breath echoing in her ears. And then it spoke. "You wanted answers," it rasped, its voice deep and guttural, "but the truth you seek comes with a price." Mariana's stomach churned, her legs shaking beneath her. "What are you?" she whispered, barely able to form the words. The figure didn't answer immediately, but its eyes, if they could be called eyes, shifted in the darkness, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. "I am the keeper," it said at last. "The one who guards what you were never meant to find." Mariana tried to speak, to ask more questions, but the words died on her lips. Her mind was racing, spinning with fear and confusion. She wanted to know more, wanted to understand what was happening, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized she might never leave this place with any answers. The figure moved closer still, and Mariana could feel her heart in her throat. You will stay here, forever, bound by the very truth you sought to uncover. The room seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as if the walls themselves were alive and watching. The air was suffocating, and Mariana could barely breathe. The figure reached out, its cold, ghostly hand brushing her cheek. "This is your consequence," it whispered. "This is what happens when you unlock the door to things that should remain hidden." Everything went still. The hum faded, the whispers died, and the coldness settled deep into her bones. Mariana felt her knees buckle, and she sank to the floor, her mind reeling. She had made the choice, but now she wondered if it had been the right one. She was trapped in this place, with no way out and no one to help her. The darkness around her pressed in, and she could feel the weight of it closing around her, suffocating her with its oppressive force. There was no escape, no hope. Mariana had crossed a line, and now there was no turning back. Mariana's mind felt like it was unraveling, the weight of her decision pressing down on her with every passing second. The cold, suffocating darkness enveloped her, leaving her with no sense of time or space. She could hear the faint hum still vibrating in the air, a constant reminder that she was not alone. The figure remained in front of her, its presence an unyielding force that kept her from escaping the truth it was about to reveal. But she didn't want the truth anymore. She just wanted to get out, to run, to break free from this nightmare. But the figure wasn't done. It leaned in closer, its cold breath like ice on her skin. "You wanted to uncover the secrets of this house," it rasped, its voice sending a shiver down her spine. "But you didn't know what you were asking for." Mariana's breath hitched in her throat, the words echoing in her mind. She tried to speak, to beg for an explanation, but no words came out. The figure's eyes, or what she could only assume were eyes, seemed to pierce her very soul. She could feel its gaze, heavy and unwavering, as though it was judging her very existence. And then, finally, it spoke again, its voice colder than ever. "This house, this place, is not merely a home," it said. "It is a prison for those who dare to seek the knowledge hidden within." Mariana's heart skipped a beat, her mind racing to process the implications of its words. "What do you mean?" she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible in the oppressive silence. The figure let out a low, hollow laugh, the sound echoing through the dark room. "You've entered a place where time and reality no longer have meaning," it explained, its tone almost pitying. "This house is a gateway, but not to the world you know. It's a passage to something darker, something far more ancient and powerful." Mariana felt a chill run down her spine as the figure's words settled in. She had thought she was uncovering a secret, something she could control, something that would explain the strange occurrences surrounding the house. But now, the truth felt like a cruel joke, a trap that had been set long before she ever set foot inside. "Why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why did it choose me?" The figure seemed to contemplate her question for a moment before answering. "Because you are always meant to find it," it said, its words laden with a dark certainty. "The house has been waiting for someone like you, someone with the curiosity and the desperation to uncover its secrets." Mariana felt her legs give way, and she collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by the weight of the revelation. "But why?" she gasped, her breath shallow and ragged. "What is this place? What happens to me now?" The figure's expression, if it could be called that, was unreadable, but its words were as clear as ever. "Now, you are bound to this place," it said. "Bound by the very knowledge you sought. The house will not let you leave, not until it has what it wants." Terror gripped Mariana's heart as she understood the magnitude of her situation. She was trapped, not just by the house itself, but by the knowledge she had uncovered. The figure took another step closer, its form now almost indistinguishable from the darkness that surrounded them both. "You are a part of the house now," it continued. "Its secrets are yours to bear, and in time you will become one with it, just as all those before you have." Mariana felt her mind start to unravel. The weight of her decision, of her actions, was crushing her. She had wanted to understand, to unravel the mysteries that had plagued the house, but now it seemed as though the truth had a price that she was unwilling to pay. But there was no escape, no way out. As the figure's words settled in, the room seemed to shift again, the walls closing in around her. The darkness grew thicker, more oppressive, and Mariana could feel her very soul being pulled into it. "This is your fate," the figure said, its voice now almost a whisper. "You have unlocked the door to the unknown, and now you belong to it. Forever." As the last words echoed in her ears, Mariana felt the world around her blur and dissolve. The house had claimed her, just as it had claimed so many before. And now, there was nothing left but darkness. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more chilling and mysterious tales like this one, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us keep bringing you content like this. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. Share it with your friends who love a good mystery, and let us know in the comments what you thought about this story. See you next time.